Welcome to tutorial 12, and this is the second tutorial about tones, and today we'll be looking at how to determine the tone of words that use tone marks. But before I get into that, I'd just like to have a few words on language acquisition in general. How do we acquire language in the first place? And it depends very much on how old we are. As very young children, all we need is to be in an environment where people around us are speaking the language, and we will acquire the language completely naturally. All of the vocabulary, all the grammar rules will just go in, and we won't need any formal education. It's a great way to learn, but it only applies to very young children. When we get into adulthood and learn a second language, we don't have that ability anymore, and we have to start learning by rules. And it's quite difficult to learn a language by rules. You would think that as a native English speaker it would be quite easy to teach English, but it's actually quite difficult. And the reason is we have to learn all the rules that we didn't learn as children, because we need to teach the rules to students. When I did my TEFL teachers course before I came to Thailand, I had to learn all those rules in a month, and it was quite tough. Then when I started teaching, I found that my students, they knew the sentence structure of all the English tenses, but they didn't know how to use them. So they would speak in simple present tense all the time. And I had to try to tell them rules so they could use the other tenses. For example, with past perfect, it's used to describe an action in the past that happened prior to another action in the past. So example, I declined the dinner invitation, which is past simple, because I had eaten, past perfect, already. But you can see the confused look on the students' faces, and every time they speak they're trying to think about rules and trying to remember which tense they use. It's very, very difficult. And it's exactly the same with foreigners learning Thai. Foreigners learn tones by rules, and Thais don't. When I first got to Thailand, I started to learn Thai, and I struggled with these tone rules for years. Then I got married and had children. My children went to school and started to learn Thai, and I was very interested in seeing how they were taught Thai, and it was completely different. There's no rules, just a complete lack of any rules. What happens is that the teacher writes words that have the same basic sound but use different tone marks. Then she pronounces each word with the correct tone, and the students, in true Thai rote learning fashion, just repeat what she says like little parrots.
Na, 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 mo, 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 mu, 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 la, 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 me, me, me.
It's a process that has pros and cons. On the positive side, Thais don't need to go through this laborious process of thinking about tone rules. They just look at a word and they know instinctively what the correct tone is. The problem is it takes a very long time. It's extremely boring. My son, when he was 4, was coming home from school saying it's really boring, I don't want to go back to school again. And you need a teacher or a parent to keep telling you what the correct tones are. Obviously young Thai children have this, but if you're an adult foreigner learning Thai, you're not going to have it. So that's how Thais learn tones. But as an adult foreigner learning Thai, you're going to need to learn the tones in a completely different way, and you're going to need to remember rules. And that's what I'm going to start today. So today's tutorial is about the tone rules for Thai words that use tone marks. And in the next tutorial, I'll go through the tone rules for words that don't use tone marks. When determining the tone of a Thai word, you need to remember two things. You need to remember the tone rule, and you need to remember the class of the initial consonant. These are the tone rules for words that use tone marks, and in a moment I'll be going through the classes of the initial consonants. I would also strongly suggest taking a look at this web page. These are my online tutorials that have been there for about 11 years. If you go to this page, you'll see a section called Website Resources, and you'll find links to the worksheet downloads that will help you write and remember Thai script. You'll find summaries of Thai consonants and Thai vowels, and you'll also find one page dedicated to tone rules. And I would suggest doing this on a desktop machine, and in one tab of your browser having the YouTube tutorial, and in another tab having the tone rules. I wouldn't suggest doing this on a mobile phone because the screen is just too small. The rules look quite complex, but actually they're not quite as bad as they first appear. These first two tone marks, my egg and my door, are as common in Thailand as stray dogs and 7-Eleven stores. You find them absolutely everywhere. I'm obsessed with reading Thai signs. I've been doing it for years and I still do it. I just can't stop myself. And these two tone marks, my tri and my jatawa, very rarely appear. And even when they do, it doesn't matter what class the initial consonant is, because the tone is always the same. With this one, the tone's always high, and with this one, the tone's always rising. So really, all you need to remember are these 6, so it's not too bad. So now let's move on to the initial consonant classes. Some of these consonants you'll recognise from previous tutorials and some you won't. But don't worry, because I'll be covering all the remaining consonants fairly soon. Whenever I learn something, I'm a great believer in choosing the easiest method to learn. And with the Thai consonants, most consonants are low class. So instead of trying to remember all of the low class consonants, if you just try to remember the high class consonants and the mid class consonants, then everything else by default is low. That's probably the easiest way of remembering it. I said a few minutes ago that the two things you need to remember in determining tones are the tone rules and the class for the initial consonant. So now we've done both things. So all that's left now is to put the theory into practice. So I'll get my assistant to write down some words and to pronounce them, and you'll see how this works in real life. My native Thai speaking assistant is back, so now we're going to do some sample words to look at tones. On the previous tutorials we looked at basic sounds, so hopefully you'll remember those, but I'll give a quick explanation anyway. And I need to explain that tone rules apply to syllables rather than entire words. Most of our sample words will be single syllable, but there will be a few multi-syllable words. So what we have here, we have the mo, ma, m initial consonant and the sara air vowel. Mo, ma is a low class consonant, and we have the first tone mark, and the tone rule for that is falling.
แม่แม่
That's the Thai word for mother. And the best way to think about a falling tone is if you're calling someone from a distance. So when you first start to call them, you put lots of energy into the sound, and as your lungs run out of air, the sort of tone falls away. So here's the next sample, and we're using the first tone mark again, my egg, but we've changed the initial consonant. It's gorgai, which has a mid-class. It's a mid-class consonant, and here we have the short I vowel. And the tone rule for a mid-class consonant and the first tone mark is a low sound, a low tone.
ไก่
And that word means chicken. Now the next word has exactly the same tone rule because we're keeping the Gorgai initial consonant and we're keeping the first tone mark, my egg. All we're changing is the vowel, which is the Sara air vowel.
แก่แก่แก่
And again, that's the tone rule for a mid-class consonant, and the first tone mark is a low sound. And that word means old in relation to people, not things. So for the next sample word, we're going to change the tone mark. And this initial consonant we haven't covered yet. I will cover it very shortly, but it's a high class consonant, and it makes an S sound. And we're using the second tone mark, my do, and our final consonant is the morma M. And there's no written vowel, so we have to add an O sound in between the initial and final consonants.
ส้มส้มส้ม
That means orange, and the tone rule for a high class initial consonant and the second tone mark is falling. So on to the next one. And there's quite a few words in Thai that have a basic sound ma, but used with different tones, and they have different meanings. So here we have the more ma initial consonant, makes an M sound, the long R vowel, no final consonant, and the second tone mark. And the tone rule for a low class consonant and the second tone mark is high.
ม้าม้าม้า
And that means horse. As I said previously, the first two tone marks, my egg and my to, are extremely common. The third and fourth tone marks are actually quite rare, and it was quite difficult for me to find sample words. But here's one that uses the third tone mark, my 3. So what we have is the to tau initial consonant. This is the sound sort of in between a D and a T. The short U vowel, and then the Gorgai final consonant, which makes an unreleased K sound. And you should remember from a previous tutorial that when you see this symbol, you just repeat the word.
ตุ๊กตุ๊กตุ๊กตุ๊ก
And that's the word for the funny little vehicles that you see around Thailand carrying passengers. And the tone rule, it's a mid-class initial consonant and the third tone mark, and it's a high tone. Here's an example of a word that uses the fourth tone mark, and it's a word of Chinese origin that's been transliterated into Thai. And it's a type of food. It's Chinese noodles that are very, very common in Thailand. So what we see is at first, the Gorgai and Warwan, GW, make a consonant cluster. And then the Y, Yoryak, so it's like Guai. And then you should remember that when you see Sara A, Sara E, and Yoryak, it's an ear sound. And we've got the Warwan at the end, so it's EL. And then the initial consonant is do tau, the sound between a D and a T. And both parts of the word use the fourth tone mark.
ก๋วยเตี๋ยวก๋วยเตี๋ยวก๋วยเตี๋ยว
Okay, so Gorgai and do tau are mid-class consonants, and the tone rule for a mid-class consonant and the fourth tone mark is a rising tone. Here's another word that uses the fourth tone mark. It's 2 syllables. The first syllable doesn't have a tone mark, and I'll be explaining how to determine tones with words and syllables that don't have tone marks in the next tutorial. So really, I just want you to look at the second syllable. The first syllable, by the way, is an H initial consonant and then the long I, so it's high. Second syllable is do tau again, and we actually have a written vowel this time, an O, and then the final morma M, dom.
หายต่อมหายต่อมหายต่อม
And on that second syllable, we've got the mid-class initial consonant and the fourth tone mark. And the tone rule is rising. And this word means to vanish or to disappear. This word uses the third tone mark, and it also uses the silent consonant that I explained before. So above the silent consonant is the short I, I vowel, and then this is another consonant we haven't covered yet. It's called bo by mai. It makes a B sound as an initial consonant, but as a final consonant, it makes a P sound.
Ip, ip, ip.
So this silent consonant or ang is mid-class, and we use the third tone mark, and the tone rule is a high tone. If you think back to what I said in the last tutorial, some words have a hoar heap, but the hoar heap is only there for tone purposes. It doesn't actually make a sound. So what you see here is an H consonant, an L consonant, then an OR vowel. Although there's an H at the front, the word actually starts with an L sound. And the only purpose of this hoar heap is to change the initial consonant class. I'll get Pom to say it for you.
หล่อหล่อหล่อ
And that word means handsome in Thai. And it begins with an L sound, but for tone purposes, we use this hoar heap, which is high class. So a high class consonant, and the first tone mark makes a low tone. The next two examples are similar to this. So this one again, we have the or ang, the silent consonant at the front. Then we have the yor yak y, the long R vowel, and the final ng consonant. So yor yak is low, but because this or ang is written here, for tone purposes, the initial consonant class of this word is mid. I'll get Pom to say it for you.
อย่างอย่างอย่าง
That word means kind, sort, category or thing. It has quite a few meanings. And the tone rule for a mid-class consonant and the first tone mark is a low tone. Now onto the final sample word. Again, it starts with hoar heap, but which has an H sound, but it's not pronounced in this word. This hoar heap is only here to make the initial consonant of this word high class. The sound that the word starts with uses this consonant, which is Y, yor yak. So it's Y sound, then the short I vowel, and then the final ng consonant.
ยิงยิงยิง
The tone rule for this word uses a high class initial consonant and the first tone mark, which makes a low sound. That word means haughty, sort of stuck up or conceited. Most Thais are fine, but you do occasionally come across people to which that adjective does apply. Well, that just about wraps up the tone rules for words that use tone marks, and on the next tutorial I'll be covering the tone rules for words that don't use tone marks.